It's time for Lefties Losing It. Let's start with this White House reporter learning an important lesson from Caroline Levitt.
So if there were peaceful protests on Saturday for the militant parade, President Trump would allow that?
Of course the president supports peaceful protests. What a stupid question. Raquel.
Thank you so much, Caroline.
Yes, stupid questions deserve brutal answers. She won't make that mistake again. Here is another supposed celebrity, a preachy clown called Doechii. She calls herself a swamp princess, and she seems to have missed the unhinged violence in LA.
There are ruthless attacks that are creating fear and chaos in our communities in the name of law and order. Trump is using military forces to stop a protest. And I want y'all to consider what kind of government it appears to be when every time we exercise our democratic right to protest, the military is deployed against us. What type of government is that?
You know, it's the type of government that upholds the law, that protects the innocent from the lawless. Doechii, if that's her name, sounds a bit like a fruit, a citrusy fruit, has a bit to learn there. Now to the ladies of The View, and Whoopi seems to think that California is some sort of a separate country and that the president cannot exercise his power over the rogue state.
Whatever happened to states' rights? I thought that was what you do, because you tell the state, this is what we're thinking of doing. You know, you don't just send people in. You don't just send troops in. But what do I know?
Well, you don't know much, Whoopi. We've worked that out. But if Whoopi's clueless, Sunny Hostin is utterly unhinged. Just listen to this.
You are an army turned inside to police its citizens can cause chaos, fascism. And so I think that's the way. Civil war. And civil war. Yeah. I think that's the way we need to look at it.
And let's hear from Sarah Haynes, who has some sobering news for the ladies. The great majority of Americans support Donald Trump's policy to deport every illegal immigrant.
66% of the American public actually thinks it is crime enough to be undocumented and therefore deported.
That it's criminal to be undocumented?
Yes, it is not. You know how the disagreement was in the beginning? We were told it was going to be violent criminals, and I think everyone at this table would agree. Yeah. Haul out the violent criminals, fine. But a very important distinction was 60% of the American public, 2/3 of independents, 90% of Republicans, and just a little under half of Democrats think the crime is in being undocumented.
Even if it's a civil offense.
Yes.
Yeah,
so what I'm
true.
saying is a massive amount of this country actually agrees with not how he's doing it, but with what he's doing.
Well, actually, I'd say the majority would be pretty happy with how he's doing it. And I don't know where the ladies of The View were during the election campaign, but Donald Trump was pretty clear that his policy was to deport every illegal immigrant, not just those convicted of additional criminal offences. Joining me now is Newsweek's senior editor-at-large and Article 3 Project Senior Counsel Josh Hammer. Josh, the ladies of The View were not happy with those stats. I don't think people at CNN were particularly happy either when the reports were on their station, but it's migrants who have most strongly gravitated to Donald Trump over his immigration policies.
Rita, and I live that out every day, actually, as a resident of South Florida. I mean, you see the Hispanic communities in the United States that have driven in droves to the Republican Party, to the camp of MAGA, to America First, Donald Trump's broader coalition. This is a long-time trend. It's been going on for at least a decade by now. Donald Trump actually in 2020, in the 2020 election that he lost to Joe Biden, actually did better among Hispanics in general in about a half century. He did orders of magnitude better in 2024. This is a huge trend there. He actually outright won the male Hispanic vote in the 2024 exit polls there. I mean, this has totally taken the Democratic Party by storm. I mean, think back to 2008. Think back to Barack Obama and the whole notion of this intersectional rainbow coalition of the ascendant, this identity politics grievance coalition of aggrieved interests. You have the gay community and the immigrant community and the this and the that and the that there. And it's all kaput. It's totally down the drain at this point. They are scrambling to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, but they have no idea where to go from here. And it's just really delectable to watch, frankly. As someone who wishes them nothing but the worst, they have no idea where to go. And I just think it's frankly glorious.
Oh, I love that. Now, we all know late night TV comics in America have completely lost the plot. They've turned into unwatchable leftist activists spewing all sorts of hysteria and lies. And Blackface enthusiast and misogynist Jimmy Kimmel is a prime example.
Been watching cable news and believe this city is some kind of totalitarian hellscape right now. It most certainly is not. I'm very angry, I have to say. I cannot believe what's going on. I knew it was going to be bad. I did not know it was going to be this bad. People who have lived here their whole lives, people who've been in this city longer than I have, the vast majority of whom have never done anything wrong, are being abducted, which is the correct word to use, by agents in masks, hiding their identities, grabbing people off the street and at work, sending people to detention centers. And to protest that, which is not only our right as Americans, it's our responsibility, Los Angelenos have been gathering to demonstrate, and with very few exceptions, peacefully demonstrate, to voice their opposition to this disgusting and unnecessary abuse of power instigated by our mentally ill president, who is dead set on exacerbating this, who actually wants conflict, who is intentionally inflaming and lying to make it seem like there's a war going on here. He wants there to be a war going on here, and he doesn't care who gets hurt in it. There's a riot outside.
Josh, I can't believe his audience is circling the drain. I don't even know where to start with all that. First, the denial that the riots are even happening, then the demented hysteria about Trump and abductions and civil war. Is Jimmy Kimmel just profoundly ignorant, or is he lying?
Rita, it was 5 years ago that the United States endured one of its tumultuous summers in the history of our country. We had the summer of love, the summer of the 1619 riots, as they're called, the Black Lives Matter Antifa riots there. And it was actually just over a week ago that we had the 5-year anniversary of the somewhat infamous op-ed from Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas calling to send in the troops. As it turns out, Tom Cotton's op-ed was harrowingly prescient, actually, because we're facing the exact same situation now in Los Angeles. And the same way that the media, the same way that they have learned nothing when it comes to trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again with this intersectional rainbow illegal immigrant, whatever it is, coalition on the left there, so too have they seemingly learned nothing whatsoever when it comes to the overwhelming, abiding moral imperative of law and order when it comes to anarchy and domestic insurrectionary activity here. I think back to the infamous CNN Chiron during the St. George Floyd riots in 2020 there, where there was that reporter standing there with a Kevlar helmet and it said fiery but mostly peaceful protest. That's basically the same energy, the same spirit, you might say, that Jimmy Kimmel is channeling in this not particularly funny quasi monologue that we just heard there. You know, these are not mostly peaceful protests, as the video that the viewers are watching right now makes entirely clear. These are extraordinarily violent protests there. Police have been clamoring, actually, for the Federal National Guard to get involved. Karen Bass, the chief of the police there, if you actually listen to what they're saying, they are saying we are overwhelmed. We actually need federal law enforcement to come back up the LAPD now. This is not peaceful stuff. And all this is done, Rita, all this is done with an ultimate intent to try to disintegrate the United States from within. That is the left-wing sentiment here, there, and everywhere. It is not to build, but is to tear down. They are trying to tear down the United States. They are trying to tear down every other major European country, Australia, New Zealand, every other first world country around the world. I'm here in Israel right now. The same thing here with the Israeli left. Everywhere you are throughout the world, the left has the exact same mentality, which is to destroy and to tear down the nation's civil society. It's playing out, though, in particularly stark terms right now back home for me in Los Angeles.
Now, what we've all been waiting for, Josh, is the input of Kim Kardashian. The reality TV star described immigration and customs enforcement deportation raids as inhumane, and that prompted a top Department of Homeland Security official to fire back. Assistant DHS Secretary Tricia McLaughlin wrote on X, Kim Kardashian, which one of these convicted child molesters, murderers, drug traffickers and rapists would you like to stay in the country? And she also included with that post mugshots and the profiles of the criminality of these 4 illegal immigrants that were recently nabbed in ICE enforcement operations. Josh, it's good to see people within the administration, people within the bureaucracy hitting back at these celebrities who mouth off, and they often do that with little consequence.
Yeah, I'm smiling over here, Rita, because I can't help but think back to the very first GOP presidential primary debate of the 2016 presidential cycle. This takes us all the way back to August of 2015, just about a decade ago. And Donald Trump has this kind of infamous attack on Rosie O'Donnell of all people, right? It was a very memorable exchange. But Donald Trump and all the people that he surrounds himself with, they have never been afraid to take on high-profile celebrities. There, Kim Kardashian these days, I suppose, blows Rosie O'Donnell out of the water as far as pop culture gravitas is concerned there. So no, they're not afraid whatsoever to take on big interests, whether those big interests are in big pharma, whether those interests are in big tech or big Hollywood or big media, big academia, big university, big Life of the Kardashians, whatever the reality show is called there, that I don't particularly claim to care to watch, to be honest with you there. But they're not afraid. They're not afraid to get in the mud there for the very simple reason that on the one hand, these celebrities are a very convenient political foil because they quite literally live out of touch in their gated communities with their private guards. You know, Kim Kardashian is not experiencing what the blue collar, oftentimes, by the way, Hispanic working class people in places like downtown Los Angeles, Kim Kardashian in Malibu or wherever the heck she's living, she is not experiencing what those people in downtown Los Angeles are experiencing there. And then on the other hand there, you know, people like Trish McLaughlin and the US DHS, they know that the American people side with them. So it's good politics, it's good policy, and they're doing very well actually on this score.
Now, Josh, on those protests in blue cities, Republican Senator Josh Hawley's launched an investigation into a left-wing group in California that he says may be financially supporting violent protests in LA. What more can you tell me about this? Because there is a lot of conjecture that there is organisation and funding behind these protests.
So we don't know a ton yet, is the very short and honest answer. I'm hoping to learn more. I was very happy to see that Senator Hawley is putting out this notice of investigation there. And this is the sort of thing that the federal government should be investigating there. Congress has the subpoena power. DHS, DOJ have a lot of powers at their disposal within the bureaucracy of the executive branch as well. Now, we do know that whether it comes to the 2020 Black Lives Matter Antifa riots, whether it comes to the post-October 7th pro-Hamas riots on American university campuses, we definitely do know that there have been outside funders. We just don't know to this day exactly the constellation of entities there. We highly suspect that individuals like George Soros are involved. There are very shady left-wing organizations. One is known as Arabella Advisors. They are known to kind of try to mobilize activist left-wing organizations. But the left has a very complicated network, Rita. Unfortunately, actually, the recent murderer of the two Israeli diplomats in Washington, D.C. was actually very involved in some of these far-left grassroots circles as well. It's an extraordinarily shady picture, actually. And I think, actually, this is not talked about very frequently, but one of the most important imperatives for people on the right in America right now, especially when it comes to investigative journalists who really have the wherewithal and the chops to actually do this, I think to try to kind of systematically break down some of these very sketchy left-wing organizations there, try to actually find out where the bank accounts are coming from, try to find out who is dropping off in mysterious 3 a.m. truckload overnight fashion, who is actually dropping off the body armor and the vests and the Kevlar helmets, at the bus station in Los Angeles, and basically telling these people, okay, here's what you need to go ahead and then stand up to the man, stand up to the LAPD. Again, we don't actually know to this day exactly who is funding this, but we see it out in the open, and it's been happening for a long time now. I distinctly remember this exact same sort of thing happening in those first few months of the 2020 George Floyd riots there. So it's been going on for a long time there. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten a whole lot in answering this question, but I'm happy that Josh Hawley's on the case.
Yeah, I think it's finally time to have a little bit of a real investigation into what's happened there, because there's now an appetite to actually find out the truth. The FBI is interested, certainly the Justice Department will be interested, and Senator Hawley is going to be pushing this hard. Now, today on Lighter News, the President and the First Lady were at the Kennedy Center to see Les Mis, and he was not one bit fazed, Donald Trump, with the prospect of actors boycotting the event.
It's been reported that some actors may be boycotting tonight.
I couldn't care less, honestly. All I do is run the country well. The economic numbers, you saw them today, they're setting records. We took $88 billion in tariffs in 2 months, far beyond what anybody expected. There's no inflation. People are happy. People are wealthy. The country is getting back to strength again. That's what I care about. And we're going to have a safe country.
Josh, this was the President's first visit to the Kennedy Center since he became its chairman back in February. He said that he's going to restore it to its former glory. And the reports are there was a little bit of booing, but mainly cheers and even chants of USA throughout the arena.
Yeah, well, this is why he's president of the United States, right? Is that he is able to say with a straight face and in quite humorous fashion, I might add, he's able to say, I couldn't care less when it comes to the possibility of a boycott from these presumably overpaid actors to go up there and emote and gesticulate and make all these things about how Donald Trump is an evil fascist or whatever there. I mean, I think back as well to when Donald Trump signed his most recent iteration of the travel ban, putting limited or full restrictions on entry into the United States from 12 countries throughout the world there. And he has this kind of video that he records sitting at the Resolute desk in the Oval Office in the White House, and he looks at the camera and says, "We don't want them." I mean, what a common sense sentiment. We don't want them. We don't want them. I couldn't care less. This is why Donald Trump is president. He has this innate kind of inherent political appeal to Joe Working Man. He is really kind of the class trader billionaire, the guy who has made oodles of money and has made a global brand icon for himself. But the way that he speaks, the way that he acts, just directly resonates heart to heart with the working men and women of America there. This clip is getting another example of that, I think.
It's amazing that a billionaire is so relatable, and a billionaire who's led the life he's led. Now, the New York Post reports President Trump has been receptive to Elon Musk's apology for that X meltdown. Musk admitted he had gone too far in his personal attacks. No kidding, mate. President Trump told the Post, "I thought it was very nice that he did that." But Josh, the president, wasn't willing to say that he'd let bygones be bygones with the Tesla SpaceX CEO. And I don't think that's a surprise. For Musk to do that so publicly, it's going to take a lot for that trust to be restored.
Yeah, I mean, to put it mildly, I mean, Elon overreacted would probably be the most polite way I can put it there. I mean, he took a personal, he took a policy disagreement. He took a very reasonable disagreement over the so-called big, beautiful bill and whether or not this is the best way to be appropriating funds there, whether or not it should be a committee by committee, one big bill. Okay, whatever. That's a legitimate debate that people on the right can definitely have with it themselves. But he took it so personally, and the way that he reacted there, I mean, essentially calling Donald Trump a pedophile by talking about the Epstein files there.
Oh, no.
I mean, not an easy thing to walk back into, right there. Having said that, I appreciate the instinct. I appreciate the instinct to try to walk back, to try to make amends. It's frankly very gracious of Donald Trump if he is willing to kind of just let bygones be bygones after such a short period of time. It's best for the right. It is best for the American right. And as someone who wants the American right to succeed, this is where ultimately I come down. It is best for the American right to try to get these two titans to try to let bygones be bygones there, but easier said than done because, again, Elon Musk dramatically overreacted here. But the guy's the wealthiest man in the world. And think of it this way, Rita. If you are Donald Trump, if you are MAGA, if you are the America First movement, if you are the Republican Party, et cetera, and so forth there, you don't want to alienate Elon Musk. You ultimately do want Elon Musk on your side for pure kind of cynical funding reasons, if nothing else there. So that's ultimately where I come down. And it seems like Donald Trump seems to agree with that there. But boy, he's being very gracious because Elon Musk had some very nasty things, to put it mildly.
I agree with you. I think the right need those two to kiss and make up. But then the fact that Elon has the capacity to have a meltdown like this publicly on X, if this was a meltdown behind closed doors, then it's another thing. But for him to take it and just completely lose it publicly, I think it's going to take a lot for that trust to be restored. But you don't want him to be writing those checks for billions to the Democrats, because he has been a lifelong Democrat up until recently, Josh. He was red-pilled, and I think that's authentic. I don't think that was opportunistic. I think his politics and his worldview has changed dramatically, and other than that little meltdown, he has been pretty sound for the MAGA movement. Josh Haber, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Rita.
The anti-Trump, anti-ICE protests, riots really, have spread to other blue cities. Let's have a look at what's happening in San Francisco. Yep, the violent protests are spreading to Democrat strongholds like San Francisco, New York, Chicago, and even south to Atlanta.
Hold on. Stop. Over there. Hammer right here. Holy
Yes, Atlanta is a blue city. Georgia may be red, but Atlanta is not. Some of the violence we're seeing in LA with the use of fireworks to target police and even police horses is extremely dangerous, life-threatening. Let's bring in international security expert Max Abrams. Max, some of the violence we're seeing seems opportunistic. Some of it, though, seems very much organised. You are an international security professor, an expert on terrorism. Do you consider some of this violence as acts of domestic terrorism?
I think it is. You know, there's obviously a reluctance by the left to describe this kind of violence as terrorism because terrorism is only done for ideologies that the left doesn't like. But the definition of terrorism certainly could include left-wing political violence. The standard definition that we use is a non-state actor, so we're not talking about a government, who uses violence against a civilian target for political aim. And it's always useful to keep that definition in mind when trying to determine whether we're looking at terrorism. I think that some of this violence certainly looks a lot like terrorism. I think that increasingly the violence is going to be indiscriminate. It's not going to be just directed against ICE or federal buildings or police forces and police cars. I think that these perpetrators pose a genuine danger to the public broadly. They're going to be increasingly setting cars on fire and probably looting stores indiscriminately, anything they can get into, attacking shops. And the reason is that these guys are simply united by anti-American sentiment. So there might be some nuances in terms of their differences, how much are they motivated against ICE or how much specifically against immigration policy, but this is just an opportunity for left-wing extremists to try to exert their control over the country and to intimidate anyone there. So yes, this is domestic extremism and unfortunately, probably increasingly terrorism.
And we saw similar scenes that destruction, indiscriminate destruction of public property, private property, the looting, the arson during the BLM riots throughout America. And I would suspect there'd be a lot of the usual suspects involved in this as well. Tulsi Gabbard says this is organised largely. This isn't just some organic gathering of people who are upset. Do you see it that way? Do you see some organisation behind at least some of the violence we're seeing?
It's a combination. I mean, if you look at sort of the gear that these guys have, some of them are clearly professionals. You know, they have fancy face masks, you know, to deal with whatever the authorities are throwing at them. They know how to deal with a gas, you know, canister thrown at them. Some of them we actually know specifically who they are. And they are part of an organization. They're career criminals, if you will. But a lot of it actually is organic. So whenever there is like some kind of a left-wing extremist cause just blowing up, whatever the extremist cause du jour is on the left, you're going to get a lot of sympathizers who join in. that was true of Black Lives Matter. It's true of the global Antifada movement. That's how these guys roll. So, yeah, probably in the beginning, there's a very important role in terms of like the organization, in the leadership. But then you just have a whole bunch of angry people. You have weak control over the streets, and they're seizing the opportunity to stick it to the United States.
Now, I want to ask about your own personal experience with some of the anti-Semitism, anti-Israel sentiment we have seen on university campuses. You've been personally impacted by that hate and hostility. Tell me what happened at your university when activists took over your class.
Sure. So let's go back. The Hamas terrorist massacre happened on October 7th, 2023. And just 3 days after that, before Israel had a chance to respond, before Israel invaded Gaza, a guy came to my office area in the hallway and put into my hand a flyer and said, do you want to go to this event? And it was a pro-resistance vigil or, event down the street in Cambridge. And so I thought that was a little bit off-putting. He shouldn't have been there, near my office, handing me propaganda 3 days after the attack, but I didn't think too much about it. Then I went to my classroom to teach that evening, and the same guy was there. And he wasn't a student of mine. He was a student of the university where I teach. So he wasn't responding actually to anything that I had said in class in particular. That day's class was actually not sort of relevant to him. I was basically just targeted because I'm a Jewish professor. The topic actually was going to be on right-wing extremism, but I wasn't able to teach until he left and stopped making a commotion. And then finally he just got up and started sort of prancing around the classroom saying that, I was complicit and the university was complicit. And he encouraged my students to walk out of the classroom and to attend this pro-Hamas event in Cambridge. I didn't immediately file a complaint about that, but then he kind of stalked me afterwards, like hanging out by my office. I don't know what I could say on television, but he basically confronted me and told me to F off or whatever to my face. So I was thinking, wow, this is really quite personal. It should be pointed out that I wasn't.
There was a campaign of intimidation because you're a Jewish member of faculty and you wouldn't come to his.
I did. That's right. And I did end up filing a formal complaint. And I wasn't the only one. Another faculty member had a related experience from the same student. And I didn't know what the status of my complaint was. They wouldn't update me. But then my phone started blowing up during the Northeastern University graduation ceremony because a student had taken it over and had, fake blood on his hands on the stage. Thanks for putting the picture up. Yeah, that's the guy. And so when I saw that,
wow,
and this made it into the news, I immediately understood that my university, Northeastern University, had clearly not dealt with this student. He had gone graduation, he had gotten his diploma, and so I was a little bit surprised because that really is pretty egregious to stalk me, to take over the classroom. Yeah, and again, I wasn't the only professor at Northeastern University to do that. We're both tenured professors. We filed complaints. We did exactly what we were supposed to do. I didn't get into a physical confrontation with the guy. I tried to use the Northeastern University system, and they rewarded him with the diploma and ended up, embarrassing themselves in the national media. I think there are a lot of lessons here. the truth is that the universities are not reforming themselves, even when they have a reason to, even when there is a credible complaint, even when there's a real danger to faculty and students, they refuse to act. And again, I do think it's important to note that Israel had not even responded yet. So this wasn't like against, the genocide in Gaza. None of that had happened. This just was an outbreak of support for Hamas in the immediate aftermath of Operation Al-Aqsa Flood.
And that's the point, Max. Northeastern University, all these universities would respond very differently if the target wasn't a Jewish professor, but a black professor or Hispanic or Muslim professor. Max Abrams, thank you for your time tonight.